David, there's an index put out by the University of Michigan that we've checked in on numerous times in the past, and you shared some of the latest information. It's about consumer expectations. And I still, to me, it's counterintuitive. It's a disconnect or something. Well, Donald Trump's back in the presidency. We're going to come roaring back economically. But consumer expectation is down, like record down. What's happening?
Well, people are realizing just how many people were living off the government, right? The government is supposed to live off the people, not the other way around. Yet we have local politicians here, several in our local state legislature, that keep crying and whining about, oh, they're cutting this, they're gutting you for that. No, they're stopping spending for money we don't have. Very simple math, right? Where are you going to pay for said benefit? That's what I ask every politician. Just show me where you're going to pay for it. Oh, we're going to tax the rich. And again, we just shared it on the show 2 weeks ago. The top 1% are paying 46% of every tax dollar collected by the federal government. 46%. The top 1%, Chip. That's up from 41% when Trump's tax cuts got enacted back in 2017. The top 10% are 76% of every tax dollar that's collected. And that is up about 6% over that same time period. So this is nonsense that you can just, but it's populist. We're going to tax the rich. No, we have to get our fiscal house in order. We need to have just a blunt conversation. We should do a whole YouTube video on that. What is the purpose of the federal government? What functions should they actually do? And the rest should go back to the states. End of story.
Mushing through the slush. On my way into work this morning, I heard a quick soundbite from Elon Musk because there's another court going after him saying you can't do what you're doing. And so the interviewer says, well, what do you have to say to that? And he said, basically, I'm paraphrasing, he said, this ship of America is going to go down unless we jettison all this extra baggage, fraud, waste, spending. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. So it's quite a tug of war that's happening right now.
It is. And again, you're going to hear all kinds of white noise and nonsense about this. But the consumer sentiment is telling you, because people recognize this, right? We had the majority of Americans voted for this by far. And it's still, as far as the last poll I saw, 74% approval of what's going on with Doge and the government cutting expenses. It's just common sense is coming back to reality, which is great to see. But this also means people realize that, hey, the free lunch is over. Job cuts are coming across multiple industries. We've talked about it for a while. So people looking out realize they're going to have to cut their spending, which tells me we have a recession most likely coming.
Well, speaking of coming back to reality, and there is no free lunch, we've only got about a minute, David, but I want you to explain this chart that shows the rubber is starting to meet the road when it comes to paying off the debt. 30 trillion, 35 trillion, 40 trillion. Just keep running up more. No, eventually you have to start paying the bills. And you shared with the team some data showing the pain that's coming in actually paying off our debt.
Right. So we're deficit spending at about $2.3 trillion this year. We have $7.4 trillion that is maturing in debt now. That has to be what we call roll. This debt is maturing, so we have to issue new debt to pay those bondholders off at maturity. So we have to issue so that's about 9.6 to 9.8 trillion, give or take a few dollars based on what interest rates are, that has to get financed in this calendar year. But because of when the maturity is, Chip, almost 5 trillion of that is in the next 90 days. It's happening right now. March, April, and May are the biggest months. And this was all the fault of former Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. And I talked about it extensively the last couple of years. She was financing everything on short-term notes or T-bills, 2 years or less, knowing that she was going to get through the election. They were hoping that the other side won. She was clearly for the other side in the last election. But now all this debt is due. And Trump now has to deal with this, right or wrong, and he realized that. And again, Scott Bessert's the smartest guy to ever hold the position, in my opinion, of Treasury Secretary. Janet Yellen is probably the lowest IQ to ever hold that position from the people I've analyzed. And so very opposite. He realizes we got to finance this, which is why he's trying to get yields down. And again, they're down. The 10-year Treasury note is down about 50 basis points or so since the election, but they need it down another 50 basis points immediately. And, they can't force that to happen. But if job losses continue to escalate, the Fed will have some leeway to lower rates on the short end of the curve, but the bond market is going to price the long end of the curve. You just need to understand, if we have to roll this debt, Chip, at north of 4%, which is what it says we'll have to do today, where rates are, that's an additional $800 billion in interest per year from where we are right now. So that deficit spending will be $3 trillion, right? So we need Doge to gut faster, harder, and yes, break a few eggs making the cake.